smaller. Click on it. It's, yeah. Did you put the file up for the PowerPoint? Oh, I didn't. No, I thought we were just going from the. Oh, we want to go from the screen? Yeah. Okay. Is that okay? Yeah, that's fine.
We sent Caroline the PowerPoint and these two handouts.
I think we were emailing
Internet
Explorer. Yeah.
There.
All right. Good morning. How you guys doing?
Good morning.
What I'm going to talk about basically is our TGM requisition process that we have in place. And I put in front of you guys, they have some PowerPoint presentation information. You also have a distribution list, and you also have an account sheet. Now, the account sheets are more or less the one-to-one relationship, which Paul probably can speak about a whole lot more in detail, and the for the different facilities for shared services. The setup probably can talk in the that's typically if we'll start off with the actual presentation information, which if you look at the Team Georgia Marketplace team meeting, when you guys went to training, they actually gave you kind of a narrative. They gave you kind of a 11-step process. And what it does is it just kind of gives you the framework of what we do, what happens in the requisition process. But it doesn't go into detail about the particulars of the requisition process. So typically what happens is if you get an email, you'll usually get an email that looks like the first page. You'll get an email notification saying, you know, and I'm using this as an approval process, but I'll back into the requisition process as well. But typically what happens is when a person submits a requisition, they'll get an email notification. It'll tell them to click on the link, log into Teamwork, so to PeopleSoft, and actually log in so you can look at the requisition. So typically, the system was working pretty quick the other day.
Yeah, I'm just noticing that.
Okay. Typically what happens is when you log into the system, you'll go into your work list from your email, and it'll give you a laundry list of requisitions that are out there that has some type of action. Probably mine's going to be a little bit longer than most. So typically you'll go into one of the requisitions, and I'll kind of go into one of the requisitions just to give you guys to take a look at one. And this will be based on the information in the spreadsheet. So I'm clicking on one of the requisitions. And the PowerPoint presentation gives you pretty much a step-by-step look at exactly what I'm doing right now. It'll give you a reference. It gives you, step-by-step that the training from DOS doesn't give you. This is more specific to labor, not necessarily to the general training they give you. They give you guys broad-based, but with this training that I'm doing is kind of honing in on what we do in labor for our business operations, which really they don't go into that at labor because they serve. So typically what happens is this is the approval view from a manager, a supervisor, directors, or whoever is in the approval path. This is what they're looking at. They're looking at the actual requisition. They're just looking at a narrative of this particular information. So they're looking at transcription services, whatever it is, so forth. They can't see anything here. So if you look in your presentation, it kind of goes through there, and it shows you there's a red box for step number 5 where it talks about select all and view details. Now typically what happens is in the system, in the teamwork system, when we're setting up individuals, be it requesters or approvers, everyone is assigned a chart of accounts typically for office supplies, so to speak. So the chart of account is just kind of this generic number that's built for time and labor charges or basically office supplies. So everybody has this generic code that's built into the system for them based on their unit. So it's going to be, if you're looking at it, it's going to be set up something like this particular setup here. So whoever's approving,
Turn it off. Yeah, sorry. I think it's our main line. Well, we got somebody on it. Oh, we do? Oh, yeah. We got
Carolyn, you still here? Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. So typically, if you're looking at, this is how we expand that screen out for managers, supervisors, and beyond to see what the distribution is set up for that. Now, most individuals who submit requisitions don't necessarily know how or where to go in and change these codes. So here, let's just say for this particular instance, I know this code setup may not be correct, because this is more or less set up for general office supplies or whatever the case is. So if I'm looking at this particular setup for whoever that person is, I'm saying, I don't think that's correct. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the requisition here. And if you look in your worksheet, turn back a couple pages, go to step 7. Right here, there's edit requisition screen. If the person clicks, whoever that is, that could be business unit, that could be the person submitting the requisition, or the manager can go into back into the requisition phase of this. What this does is it takes them back to the review and submit portion. Now, again, going back into step 8, again, this is a step-by-step detail of this. If they expand this sideways triangle, I call it, or if you hover above it, it says expand section. If you click the expand section, it shows you your accounting information. So let's say the person submitting this particular requisition wanted the ship to be to another location. They can change their ship to location here. They can change the quantity. Can't change the amount, but they can change the quantity. They'd have to cancel this line in order to change the dollar amount. And here is the waiting part. Now, if we look at this second chart field right here, when there's detailed explanation in here, in the presentation, you look at page, I don't know if it's page number, but there's steps 8, 9, and 10. It kind of goes into detail, and it shows you exactly where those chart of accounts are for that particular information. If there's anything in here that needs to be changed based on the business unit. So let's just say for all intended purposes, you usually have to start at chart field 1. If I wanted to change the distribution, if this was a shared service or if this was a shared good that had to be split 2 ways, 3 ways, 4 ways, this is where you would change the distribution and your accounting information, which is right here. You'd start hitting your add or new row. You would hit a second row if you were doing 2 rows. You would hit, it'll ask you how many you want. If you want 2 rows, you want 3 rows. It'll give you an opportunity to set up how you want to distribute the charges based on the business need. Because the person setting up the requisition is set up for office supplies, not necessarily for the service-based services that are shared throughout the entity, throughout labor, whatever the case is. So in most instances, in order to make the change, you start at chart field 1, you add the line, and it'll give you however many lines you want. Once you do that, when you get to chart field 2, those lines will be there as well. So you'd have the blank lines for however many you need, and you would add your chart field distribution for those additional lines. Now, there's a spreadsheet that we provided you guys with. Now, for shared services inside the central complex, it's a little bit different, but this list gives you a detailed description of what those breakdowns should look like if you're sharing something. So let's just say if you're sharing janitorial services, if you're sharing repairing of your HVAC, if you're repairing something, if you're buying something that's going to be shared throughout the facility, then this would tell you what the distribution should be based on the location you're at. So for this particular case, especially Carolyn, for the field side, that should be helpful information for you, and so forth. So basically, this gives you a pretty good indication of what the distribution should look like, and also gives you the codes that you would use as well for those locations. Now, for IT, it's a little bit different based on their needs, and their scenarios are a little bit different. So typically what we have also as an aid for this scenario is there's a state chart of accounts that we've gotten from SAO, and it shows the actual personnel services and the different accounts that are associated with it. And actually the numbers, they're usually going to be the first 3 digits, and the last 3 for this particular, these 3 sheets here are kind of zeros, which are called roll-up accounts. So what happens is when you're in this particular field, and I'll give you guys an example here, your account, if you're going to use the lookup window, and I don't know if it's, okay, so if I'm going to do, if you look at this sheet, it says 501,000. Now 000 is your roll-up account, but let's say that's not a good one. I'm going to take another one that has a little bit more information than that.
Thank you.
Which one?
Repair maintenance. 301.
301.
Third one down. No, down.
Down.
615.
Yeah, 615. So if I want to say the account begins with 615, and I'm going to do a lookup. This gives you a bucket list of different types of repair and maintenance that you're looking at. So you got pest control, repair, maintenance, computers, janitorial service, maintenance agreements, just straight repairs and floor care, laundry. There's a bucket list of 615, which is repairs and maintenance, and the different types are all listed here. So there's 24 different 615 accounts here. So on this sheet, it kind of, if you look at 615, it says repairs and maintenance. To get down to the detail, when you do the hourglass lookup, you say 615, what's underneath there? Because if you do 615,000, it won't take it. It won't take it. It's your roll-up account, so you can't actually, as the account, you can't put that information there. So typically, this sheet here is just kind of a narrative to get you in the ballpark, to get down to the hourglass, to kind of give you into the detail of it. So for this particular case in point, they have a number here. Their information there. But again, if you have multiple lines, you're going to have to put all your information in there. Everything is usually 10-100, your department, fund source, class. Your class and your account is a one-to-one relationship. So if you you can't necessarily, let's say 301, regular operating expenses. You can't have, your only options for 301 is the numbers that are listed. So in 61000 all the way down to 742000. Those are your options for your 301 class. You can't use a 301 number and have something in motor vehicle purchases or whatever the case is. They don't align. They're always going to give you an error message.
So you will get an error message if you do that?
Yes.
Okay.
So that'll be between your account and your class. Your account and your class is a one-to-one relationship.
Right.
Bruce,
Yes.
I think you need to clarify that unless I'm mistaken. I'm the one that's going to get the error message. She's not. I think the system will take it and it'll take out as a budget check.
Well, if they're doing a budget check,
If they do it that, yes.
they'll know it. And typically, and that's kind of one of the things I'll go back to, Paul, because sometimes we're seeing where they're not budget checking and they're forwarding minus the budget check.
I think so, but I've had some, I always do budget checks, and if I have the class wrong, it doesn't, I don't know it. It doesn't give me an error message. It really is the one that catches it.
Well, to say it makes it may not like tell you that. It may say when you budget check it, it should say error instead of valid. It says valid.
No, if it's an error, I'll try to figure out what I did wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not telling you at my level.
I don't think we're going to get that as a budget exists. The reason that budget exists is wrong.
Right. Because I've had meetings put back by Willie because I'll put the wrong class.
The easiest way that I find to look at that is you're putting in your information. The account code is the what. You know, what am I buying? So I'm buying janitorial service. So okay, you know that's going to be repair and maintenance. Once you determine with the lookup that Bruce showed you, and you know that it's repair and maintenance, then you can look at your sheet. I mean, you already looked at your sheet initially to find out the first 3 digits of the code. If you look at the top of that, it'll show 301. So it's that one-to-one relationship. Once you know the account, then just look at your sheet and it'll show you exactly what the class is going to be.
Yeah, my mistake is I so you put in 305 because I think so, but sometimes I forget. Every once in a while, 301.
Okay, so once we've clarified this information here, and again, there's the check budget here. Now, if the budget's invalid, and we can check this one.
Is the check budget in these steps?
No, that's actually part of the requisitioning process, actually the submission of the requisition. So this is more kind of on the back end of the approval process. Typically, what happens with the check budget, that's done at the requisition phase. So who's submitting the requisition, who's building the requisition, should be checking the budget before they submit the requisition. We've seen cases, sometimes it doesn't happen. It's not a deal breaker. It'll continue to move forward. Before we can turn a requisition into a purchase order, it has to pass budget check. If there is no budget check completed prior to that, then what happens is it won't move. It'll just sit out there kind of in a suspended state.
Okay, I heard somebody mention that when they did budget check, it came back with an error. It said error. What is that telling me? Where do I look to find out what the error is, or do I have to worry about that?
Well, can you see where I'm moving here where it says budget check status valid?
Yes.
Right here, if there's an issue, it would tell you here is either an error, it would tell you it's incorrect.
Okay, so
but it doesn't. Go ahead, Carolyn.
When it says error, then do I look at, say, my class and account? Is that where it would be off? Where would it be wrong?
Well, typically it's kind of hard to say depending on if there's money in the account that you've selected.
Okay.
Or if there's and I'll go back into it again.
You know, they do budget check and it's error.
They click on it. They click on it, and it'll tell you what it is.
If the word error will be highlighted, and if you click it, it'll tell you what the issue is. It'll give you an idea.
If you click on where I showed you I just clicked on where it says valid, and this is comments. If you click on it when it says error, it'll tell you exactly, kind of put you in the ballpark where it is.
Gotcha.
What the issue is.
Right. Okay, I got it.
So yeah, it'll be highlighted in red. It'll say error, and you can click on it, and it'll tell you where it is. But let's say, for instance, Frankie, it says valid, and you don't know until you get back to it. A lot of times it's kind of the combination of class that it'll take it, because when we're doing requisitions in this phase, there's a difference between budget check for money in the bank and budget check just to see if it's a good stream. So in this phase of it, what we're looking for is it a good stream? Does those numbers, that combination look good together? In the system, it says, yeah, all the fields are there. It looks like a good combination. Now, if there's funding there, that's when it gets to budget, and budget says, that's not quite right because we don't have any money budget at that particular account for those services. So we have to either move or change the account to class to where there is funding set up for whatever they're trying to purchase. But
Okay.
in this phase, it's just looking for if it is a valid stream. Does it make sense? That kind of give you.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that, but I'm saying the account code and the loan, whatever that 301, 303 class is,
Class.
it does not come back as an error
Mhm.
to me. I was saying, because that's what Paul was saying.
Right.
Yeah, it does not.
Right. Well, like I said, we can work with budget to figure out a easier way to do that, or actually say, okay, from this point forward, this is what needs to go there for those scenarios.
Yeah, I mean, that was fine. If it gave me an error, then yeah, we'll fix it.
Right.
It would save them steps from pushing it back.
Try, just for the sake of argument, why don't you try intentionally doing one wrong? Put a wrong class in, I just want to see what you get at that point, because I haven't done it. Okay, put 301 for your class instead of 312, and see what happens. No budget check it.
Paul, I don't think it's going to error out where it's going to give me may still show the status as valid. I have to go back in and see what it looks like.
What you doing now?
It's going back to the requisition phase. So now I have to check the budget again. Actually, and let me show you guys what I did was I changed the class to 301, and now it says budget status is not checked, so I'm going to check the budget again.
Yeah, I'll find out what that should do.
Probably should use something real odd, like a 303 maybe. Let me take
Well,
out
301 is invalid for that combination. I changed it small. Some of it is.
So,
still comes invalid.
It's not checking on class.
Just checking on account.
Sure, on account, it's not checking. Class is not one of the fields, so you would not know in that scenario.
well, what would make it?
You didn't have enough money in it, potentially you'd get an error. If the, I'm not sure what you're getting at that level, but when I'm seeing the budget check errors, typical ones I'll get will fall into two categories. They'll say no budget exists, which means the chart fields are screwed up, or it means exceed budget tolerance, which means we don't have enough money loaded in the budget in order to cover the expense, and I can override that. And then if it's no budget exists, then the person that entered the requisition has to fix it or wherever it is in the process. So I can't fix that.
But this goes back to her point. If her class is incorrect with her account, but it still takes it as a valid budget,
She won't know it.
she won't know it. And so even if it's pushed back, she still won't know what the issue is.
Well, we would tell her.
Yeah, Willie knows. I mean, he tells me when he comes to the back, this is the wrong class code, please change it to whatever.
So whatever it is. Okay.
Basic things you're going to get as far as a bad combo. You're going to get the program program, you have to know your program. Your program, by and large, isn't going to change. There's a few exceptions. Caroline, you're going to run into some stuff where potentially it might at some point, but for the most part, it doesn't change. So you've got that. You got your account code that we would potentially kick it back to you for. And that's just the way Bruce showed you how to do that. Your class is going to be a one-to-one to your account code. So once you're okay with the account code, just look on your sheet and find out what the class is. It's going to be right there at the top. And then just put the correct class in. And then the other potential thing that you could get is you could use a fund source that's not valid for your area. That, probably are going to know what your fund sources are, because they're going to be, they tend to be repetitive.
Okay, let's pick back up in here. I don't want to get too deep down into the trenches. I'll say those for Q&A. All right, so if we were still staying on track and we're looking at step 12, I guess, which would be approving the requisition, which necessarily, again, that's just after the fact. So you would be looking at the approving the path. Let me get back into here. So at this particular point here, if they have made the changes, whatever the case is, then they would actually be in the process of either approving it or denying it or pushing it back. Now this is typically where Paul gets to the point where he has to either, after he's looked down into the details of it, again, because depending on the approval path, it may not have gotten past or to the point where we can create a purchase order for it. So in most instances, what has to happen is Paul will make a decision that it needs to be pushed back. He'll add comments into it, and then he'll push it back. But in most instances, if these sideways triangles are expand buttons. So in most instances, if you see the triangle to the side, there's usually a comment in there. There's some information in there. You just have to get into the habit of expanding the triangle where you can see what the comments are. So there's information usually in here in the comments or something that someone puts in or whatever the case is. They just need to know how to expand them open to see what the detailed information is. So in most instances, if you use this expand triangle, if you hover above it, it will tell you what it means. It'll give you an option to expand it to see the details of it, which is kind of the essence of where we're at, because in most instances, the one-to-one relationship to what we were doing in the old system versus what we're doing now, it's kind of there. We're just kind of refining it as we're going along and knowing exactly what to put in there. So at this particular case, it would get approved and pushed to move forward toward a purchase. Now, in most instances, and what I'll do is go back to the work list. If we're looking at the work list for the individual, if there's multiple requisitions in here, typically this is your work list. And what happens in your work list, this is stuff that needs action. This is work items that need action taken to them. In most instances, if you're getting the email notifications or whatever the case is, they're going to be in your work list. But if you're, let's just use Frankie, and I kind of worked with you on this last week. If we look at and I'm going to show you guys this so you'll be able to understand a little bit more clearly why we're looking at changing, why we're putting in requisitions and what we're putting in requisitions for. Frankie, it's okay if I use your name?
Sure.
Is it F-R or F-A?
It's F-R-A.
The primary reason why we're pushing everyone to submit requisitions is so they can track their requisitions throughout the entire. No, that's fine. That's fine. Okay. And so they can track their requisitions throughout the life cycle. So that means from the time they generate the requisition all the way through the payment process. Now, at this particular screen, which I'm in, the actual what we call manage requisitions, and typically, again, this is kind of my little trick button over here, my expand button. If you look at your expand button here, let's see, I'll look at one that's, let's look at PO dispatch. I can see the status of it is. What it is if I expand this out from the triangle, it kind of gives me a narrative of the information and where it's at. So everything that's highlighted here, that's where it's at in the process. So the requisition, I can look at the requisition if I wanted to. I can look at the approvals. If only the approvals were listed, I would only see, it would tell me where it's at in the approval process. So if I just submitted it and it was only on the approval, it would tell me where it's hung up at, who has it, where it's at, how I can get it moving. For this particular requisition, I can see now, which number was that? PO dispatch. I can see a PO has been dispatched, and that's the furthest it's gotten into the process. So everywhere where it's in color, and I can hover above it, I can see what it is. I can see from the purchase order, I can see what the purchase order number is. I can see who actually issued the purchase order. I can see the requisition number. I can see the merchandise amount. I can see what I need to see for this particular purchase order. Now, these are all the requisitions that are actually in the process and actually are not complete. But if I wanted to change what I was looking at, let's say I want to see only the completed requisitions, I could change what I want the view to look like, what purchase orders that I want to see. So if I'm looking at these are all the POs that are totally complete. So if I'm looking to see status, and what I'm going to do is I'll just take one and expand it out here. You can see the different highlights we have here, where it's at, invoice, payment. So instead of the customers having to call anyone to figure out where their requisition, where their this is, or whatever the case is, if the vendor say, well, I haven't been paid, where's my payment, blah, 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 they can actually go into the requisition that they created and see where it's at in the process. This gives them the option to not necessarily be dependent on finding that information out, or someone's not here this day, or whatever the case is. It gives them that opportunity to know exactly for the requisition where it's at, what it looks like, where it's at in the payment process, where it's at in terms of invoicing, if it's been received. Again, and so in a lot of instances, what happens here is when we say receipt, that means we've gotten the product or service in-house. So it's received. That does not mean a payment has been made. That just means we've received the product. So what happens is invoice means a voucher has been created. Again, still doesn't mean a payment has been made. That just means a voucher has been created for them to be paid. Would that be correct, Seth? When there's a payment posted, that's when the check's in the mail to the vendor. So if we click on here, and we're still working on this, correct, Rob?
Just the part that says that the check's cleared.
Okay.
So everything else is in there. We're working with the bank to get the file that'll actually say in the system that the vendor's cashed the check.
Okay. So here, if whoever's looking at this requisition, it will tell them when the check, the payment clear date, this information right here. It will tell them what day it went out, but it will tell them also what day it cleared. So the business unit would have the ability to be able to advise their vendors and customers on where it is in the process if they needed to. They would even have that information for their records if they needed that information. So again, leading into TeamWorks, what happened was we did not have a data migration. So a lot of information was built pretty much from ground level zero. A lot of most of our internal customers can't see this information. So now going forward, moving into FY17, we're sending out correspondence asking everyone to submit requisitions for services and goods that they've never done before. But that allows them the opportunity to track it throughout the process. If you don't do that, if you don't create a requisition, there's no way to track your information without actually going back to the old way, because TeamWorks is owned by SAO and Department of Administrative Services. We have no ownership over it. We're only a rider. So we can't give you the access that we once may have had the ability to do with the old system. You have to now go through different training and testing and blah, 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 and separation of duties. So there's only certain parts that accounts payable can have a hold on. There's only certain parts budget can have a hold on. There's certain parts purchasing has a hold on. Receiving, everyone has their own module, and they don't cross paths. So everyone has to have a different level of training. So even from the customer standpoint, when it talks about managing the requisitions, when it talks about submission of the requisitions, they're all in a module section. So you can see certain information and to help our customers internally to better to flow with their business process and not feel like they're not empowered. Putting in the requisition gives them that ability to track it throughout the process. So that's why we're now saying submit requisitions to make sure that the coding information is correct. It gives everybody that ability to see more than they've ever been able to see, but in that same token, to understand the system. So right now, that's why we're just trying to educate our users internally and externally what it looks like when they're looking at the system. So if we're looking at this, in most instances, when we're looking at this process, and I'm going to collapse this, when you see this, this means nothing to you until you expand it. Tells you where it's at. Tells you what it is, kind of gives you a narrative of it, how much it was, who the vendor was. And again, you can see where it's been at within the process. And again, all but completed means that there is some progress on it, but it may not be totally closed out. Once it closes out, then it'll fall off of all but completed. You can also narrate this in different forms if you want to see what a partially completed, what a partially canceled, what have been created. There's a lot of different ways you can look at this list or filter this list based on what you're putting in. But here is just pretty much kind of a narration of what it is. So your legend across the top tells exactly a narrative of the information, but if you want to go down into the details of it, all you have to do is expand it. And then most of the different modules, that sideways triangle, that expansion, gives you a more detailed look at exactly what you're looking at. Any questions so far? Silence is golden.
There's also, I think Bruce mentioned, on what the vendors call you and look at payments, and I think there's some functionality we can roll it out just yet, but the vendors could actually create an ID if they have their tax ID, and they can look at the status of their invoices that they've sent and do, online through Team Georgia without having to call you as well. So if you get a lot of calls from vendors, one thing is an additional step that we can roll out that, that you can start saying, here's how you can check now, and give them the information to set up the self-service so that you don't have to take you can kind of point them in a direction else. If they're seeing something they don't like in there, they may call you and say, but that would also kind of eliminate maybe one of those first line calls that you get.
And yes.
I do have a question about you know, Kermit and I are both approvers, and we're on the same level, so he can approve it or I can approve it. And when we've gone back to look, you know, to try to find one or check like you've been showing us, I can only see the ones I've approved, and he can only see the ones he's approved. Is that the way it has to be, or is there a way we can see all the ones that were approved, whether they were approved by him or by me?
Yeah, typically in your work list, once you approve them, they only allow you to view the what you've approved. Mm-hmm. And so if you guys want to look at everything in a narrative format, what he's done, and you actually you will have to look at the actual submitter, not the actual approver. So it won't give you a list based on both of you having the same approval pad.
All right. So if we had a manager, had one yesterday that she sent us one, and we knew we'd seen it before, so we needed to go back so we can look by. I could look by that manager and see everything that had been done for her, whether I approved it or he did.
That is correct.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
That is correct. That's in the managed requisition area. All you have to do, as you saw what I did with Frankie's name, you would just search their name, and then you would be able to put their name in, and it'll list everything that they have out there and what action that has happened or needs to happen to it.
Gotcha. Okay, that will solve that problem then.
Yeah. So basically, what I'll do is I'll go back into that information, and I'll show you exactly what. So we're not. So her question that she was asking is, there's instances where there's multiple individuals listed for the approval pad. So let's just use budget for instance. Budget all are on the same approval level, which is C. So everyone in budget gets the same email, no matter if it's for them or not. So what happens is they have to go in and look at the requisition to determine who approves it. But for this particular instance, let's say, Caroline, who's the person that requisition was for?
It was Robin Cone.
So this is what she was asking about. Her and Kermit both get notifications for this particular individual that there are requisitions out there that need to be approved. So for this particular one, you can see the budget. The budget is valid, but the status is in pending. So if we expand it out, we can see here where it's in the approval pad, and we can click on the approvals. We can see where they're at in the approval pad. So we can see here where where it says multiple approvers, if I want to know who these individuals are, all I need to do is click on it, and it will tell me who the two individuals are here that will get the email notification that that requisition is due for approval. So for this particular, there's Carolyn and
that's Kermit.
Kermit, yeah. I got his name on the tip of my tongue, and just the official name. So for this particular case, that's in the approval path. Those are the two. That's the two individuals here that get the notification once Robin has approved it. So her question was, if Carolyn goes in and approve it, how does Kermit know that it's been approved? Or they're trying to see a narrative. The only way they can do that is to actually search by the individual name, because it doesn't give you a narrative for both of those individuals, because once whoever approves it, then that person name shows up in the approval pad. So if Caroline approves it, her name goes there. If Kermit approves it, Kermit name goes there. So it tells exactly who the approver person was, not the actual both individuals that show as both. So it kind of tells who did what action to it, and that's the reason for that, Caroline. to have
Yeah.
a footprint on who the approver was.
Okay, that'll work. That's not a problem. We just needed to know how. So that's good.
Okay. Yeah, and this is the way you can go in and check for that individual to see if there's anything else out there that needs, if you've lost the email or whatever the case is, and they say we sent something and it hasn't moved yet and it's not on your work list, you can go to Manage Requisitions, pull up their name, and it'll show it to you, and you'll be able to go in and take action on it.
Okay.
Questions, comments?
Now, would it tell you actually entered in the information?
The requisition? Well, that's by this information here, your requester. So whoever your requester is, their name there. Kim, what do you have? K-I or K? K-I? Just use ID. No. When you go to the PeopleSoft, use K.
Okay,
Les Robinson. KR. So let's use yours for instance. So I can expand yours out as well. We can see where it's at. And if I want to look at who your approval path was, same thing here. So as I was showing you guys earlier, when you're at this level here, this is the budget window. Now, when I showed it to you guys earlier, it says multiple approvers. But for this particular instance, Walter Frazier approved that requisition. So his footprint is on that as the person that's approved it after the program director approved it. Downstream here, Phyllis has it, and this is your buyer here. This is your last person in the stream. So I know it's gone all the way through this process here, and this is the footprint of the individuals who've had some interaction with this requisition. You can see where it's at the receiving portion now. So a receipt's been created on it, and the next step will be the invoice side of the invoice to payment. So if you're looking for your requisition and where it's at in the process, you can come here, expand it out, and see where it's at in the process.
Now, if I have my codes and I want to make sure that they're right so it won't kick back, do I follow up with Walter?
That's going to be too late now at this point. But let's go.
Before you put it in, you just want to enter in the information before you send it over for an approval.
Yes. Well, that'll be when you're creating the requisition. So at this point, we're so far downstream, it's probably correct at this particular point. So we can't change it because we've already generated a purchase order. We've already created a receipt. Now, the only way that we would be able to change that process would be at our level. You couldn't change it at this point because what will happen is when Caseta gets ready to create a voucher for payment to the vendor, she'll look at the codes and she'll say, not right. I need this to say X, Y, and Z. What she'll do is she'll kick it back to us. We'll have to go back in and cancel the receipt because we can't change it without canceling the receipt. Make the change to the accounting line and then save it and then issue a new receipt for it. And so once we do that, then the change will take place if the coding is incorrect. But typically, the fail-safe is the last person in the food chain is Caseta. If it's gotten past everybody else leading up to that, and Caseta gets it and says this is no-go, this can't work, then it falls back. But we can't send it to you at that point because we've already generated a purchase order. You couldn't do nothing with it anyway. So we would have to correct it at the purchasing side because we were the ones that originated the purchase order. So if going forward we want to do another requisition and you were unclear about the codes, then potentially what you would have to do is to say, let me just make sure these are okay. So you may want to contact budget or look at this and say, okay, who approve my level C. A level C is usually budget. Let me call them to make sure that these codes are correct for whatever setup. Yeah, just for your clarity. And then you'll be able to know that information, or, you know, you may know they are correct already. But that just kind of gives you an indication where your information is in the flow. Any other questions?
What you refer to right there is kind of what Nancy Van talked about, and that's kind of what the meeting was set up for. Because when it gets to Caseta, usually it's the account code that Caseta has an issue with. I guess SAO is telling her no or something. But what I would like, because I try to save them as much time as possible. I want to be able to get it right the next time. But you just said there's no way it's coming back to us, so there's some way there's some communication or something that can be so that we do get it right the next time.
A lot of times we don't be knowing if it's money in the budget or what it is.
There's only going to be certain things that you're generally going to use. Depending on what area you are in the organization, there may be 5 or 10 account codes, major account codes like repair and maintenance or other operating, whatever, that you're going to use. And that's probably going to be a discussion you can have with your budget analyst. Call up and say, I'm going to buy a widget machine. And we're going to look up and say, okay, widget machine is whatever it is. It's, this is the account code you're going to use. And the next time you buy a widget machine, you'll know what to use.
But it's already gotten, the one that we originally used has already gotten through budget, and it's not changed until it gets to Caseta.
Well, see, I would argue that if we didn't like it, we would have kicked it back to you or changed it ourselves.
I have multiple ones that have not been changed until it's gotten to Caseta.
Was that when we first presented this to you, or has it been?
They've been scattered throughout.
But I mean, I want to say in the beginning, it was probably a learning curve for everybody in terms of, because the account codes were not for one-to-one relationship compared to the FARS code. So everybody trying to learn. And I think, Caseta, you were getting some feedback from SAO about certain codes or something like that.
Yeah. We paid them, they called me up, why you use the code? So that's when we was like, hey, yeah, still good, still secure.
And to be honest, Frankie, there is a learning curve with this, and the feedback we're getting from the entities above us, that we're well ahead of the curve compared to other agencies that have done this transition. So there's always going to be a give and take when it comes to that, and the whole point of the matter is, as long as we try our best to stay engaged in the process, there's always going to be a hiccup in the road, and so there's no fault in your part, our part, their part. What we're doing is, as we get closer to this, that's why we're trying to inform everyone what we're doing, how we do it, what it looks like, how they can better perform in the system. Then it gives them that basis, because every day we all learn something new about this system or something. And so in order to put ourselves in a position to be, as an agency, better, we have to enlighten you guys what to look for, what not to do, what to do. And there's parts in here we're kind of catching on the fly ourselves. So when I'm saying this training I can give pretty much in my sleep, because I've walked around and worked with individuals on a one-on-one basis to know that this does help them to do their job better, and gives them that sense of empowerment to say, okay, if that's the issue, and that's, I know what I'm looking for now. It's not trying to read a foreign language that I have no clue about. At least they can say, okay, now I have some tools to help me better assess this. And again, there is a constant learning curve in this. I mean, giving an example, we work with this system every day, and we were trying to figure out how to put in contract headers over the last 3 or 4 days. And we deal with the system every day, and there's still a lot to learn. So again, and the budget group, they deal with it every day. There's a kind of a moving target that they have to look at, because what we call one thing in terms of where we were loading money in the initial phase of this and even going forward, when SAO looks at it, they say, no, it doesn't go there, it goes here. I said, but we've always put it in this particular account called that. No, it goes here. So we have to now backtrack, change it, and in a lot of instances, if there's multiple items that we've dealt with, we have to fix those, and then in some instances what happens is we may not be able to feed that information back to the business unit because we're trying to fix 20 or 30 things that may have happened to make sure that from the audit standpoint, they're not standing on our neck saying, look what you did, because that's in most, that in most instances is what happens is from the audit perspective, they're saying you did this wrong. They don't look at the business unit because they're saying they're just bystanders. They're looking at from the financial standpoint, what did you do, how did you fix it, and how did you keep it from happening going forward. So part of the process that we're involved in, we know there's holes in the system. We know there's issues, and what we're trying to do is just to kind of shore up them on the front end to make sure that we have less to catch on the back end. So there's that exchange back and forth that sometimes there's a lead and a lag, but we still want to engage in it. And again, we all know who to call for what we need to call, when we need to call. So when there's an issue, you call, we call, whatever the case is, but we want to make sure that we get it straight. So again, we can make it work. We will make it work. Just we have to stay engaged in the process.
Most of your questions about IT training, though, right?
Well, that's just the one that has been problematic, is finding the right account.
So is there one answer? Is there one answer to IT training?
Well, we spoke to one because Frankie kept saying, I'm purchasing training. Well, that's considered registration.
That's what it's called, SAO.
That's registration. It's no purchasing training. They have a service and sales, what has is training, but we're not selling the training. We're registering for a training, even though we're.
So that's part of the terminology.
That's
differences.
That's why
Yeah.
we have to
Yeah,
communicate and make sure it's clear.
training for classes, for everything, and we had a couple kickbacks, but we did it, and so I think this was the one where I just called Cassetta and said, tell me what to enter. But then I learned that she doesn't want me to enter it in the requisition. She wants me to get an invoice from them and send it back, which I didn't know either. So
Now you know.
now I know.
Again, part of the learning process. So again, there's terminology differences. There's you know, again, we're trying to understand. We're trying to put definitions together, and other things that Suzanne is trying to roll out in the process that's going to help not only this small group but the larger body in itself. So there's just get the feedback we need. Does this help? What we can change to help make your jobs easier? Because again, our job is to support you guys.
All this is going on the help site. We got a recording of this, and all these handouts will be on the help site. And every time we do something.
Yes.
I think somebody may have addressed this, but I want to be sure they talked about getting it right when we had it wrong. On the account numbers, you know, for us, they're probably going to be numbers that we use over and over and over. We're very seldom going to have anything really way out there or crazy. But if I'm looking for something and I'm not sure about the account, what would you rather us do? Would you rather us email you, Paul, Cassetta, and say, I've got this, where do you want me to put it? And then I'll always know, I'll make a note and I'll always know where to put it in the future.
Call me, Carol.
Okay.
Carolina, you hear Paul?
Yeah, he said call him. I had an alarm system yesterday, and I know that security goes in repairs and maintenance, and I felt like when I looked I would find the alarm system, but I didn't, so I had to make a choice. And like I said, you know, I want to make the right choice and make a notation on my stuff so that every time I do it, I'll be consistent and do it right.
I would have put it in repair and maintenance as well. And sometimes you'll find one that doesn't say alarm system or something, but then you can use something that's a little more generic. typically they have a generic other in there someplace, and that's probably
Yeah, well, I actually use perimeter security, so if that's wrong, we'll just have to fix it.
Yeah, that's correct. Anything else, ladies and gentlemen? Well, I appreciate your time. Again, if you have any other questions, Janelle?
I just wanted to do a wrap up.
Please. You need me to wrap up, or you?
No, I mean, are you finished?
I am.
Okay.
Sure. Please do.
Thank you.
Driver's seat, man.
Good job.
Are we done?
No, one second.
Almost.
Almost, okay.
I just wanted to do a quick review. Bruce did a wonderful job. Paul interjected with some good questions. So if you brought your cell phone, can you take out the cell phone and go to KAHOOT.IT, and I'm going to pull it up on mine. So you all can go to that real quick. We're going to take a little quiz. Can I get out of this, Bruce?
Yes.
Has someone done this before?
Yeah.
Okay.
Say it again. What do we put in?
It's just put in KAHOT.IT.
KAHOT. Okay.
2 O's. OOT.
Okay. KAHOT.
.IT. Okay, and just give me a moment to sign in. Okay. See if I can get this. Yes.
Oh.
But the mouse is, oh, there we go. Okay. Okay. Okay, that's loud. How do you turn that down? That's loud. Okay. Okay, let's see if we can do this with 8229. Okay, so are you ready? Is it prompting you for a PIN number? Okay, so enter PIN number 682229. 68229, yeah. And enter, yeah. Hopefully that'll. Okay, let's start with question number 1. Okay, so which item is used to indicate? Okay, I'm sorry. Are y'all gonna miss it? Are we going too fast here? Okay, so the question was, we'll let everybody catch up. Are we all caught up now? Okay, so which item is used to indicate the fiscal year? Okay, so do we all agree it's project code? Do we understand why it's the project code and not the fund source? Yeah, so it's right. So the project code will indicate what fiscal year, if you're using grant funds, it will indicate what fiscal year associated with the funding you're using, which is very important for those of you entering requisition. So a lot of times you'll see a project code, you'll see a fiscal year at the end of it. That'll tell you what year's money you're using. And if you don't know, usually you can talk with whatever grant manager is associated with the fund. So if it's UI, usually it's going to be MAX, or if it's ES funding, it might be same. If you're entering requisitions related to vets, or whatever the case is, the project code will help you to know what fiscal year we're talking about. Okay, are we ready for the next one? Okay. Okay. Okay, how many digits are in a project code? We have 3, we got 5, we got 12, we got 7. Oh, okay, yeah, okay, so you got to select the answer. Okay, so 12 or more. The project code, just always remember that the project code is that long string of numbers. And so if you ever come across a project code that's very short, that's not correct. Don't use the short project code. Your project code is always at least 12 or more digits. So just keep that in mind. Project code is always at least 12 or more digits. Okay. Okay. Okay, Frankie. Okay, what do all program codes begin with? Is it 2100, 2050, 3310, or 312? I'm not crying, I'm sorry. Okay, that might have been a little tricky. We got some mixed answers. So just program is one of the chart fields. When you're entering requisition, you have to fill out a program code. For Department of Labor, all of our programs start with 3310. And we only have a few programs. So you're either in, well, we have programs and sub-programs. So you're either in labor administration, the administration program, or unemployment insurance program, workforce solutions program, or labor market information. Those are the only 4 we have. And they all start with 3310. So when you're entering your chart field, your program codes start with 3310. The last few digits are going to depend on whether or not you're in administration, workforce, UI, or LMI. Do we have any questions about the program code?
It will never change.
It will never change. Usually, if you're in a program area, now, do we have people in here that enter requisitions for other areas?
We have projects that I had to enter a different one for because it was child labor.
And that was unusual.
Right.
Yeah.
That had to do with our contractors.
Okay.
That were working on that project.
Okay, Caroline. Okay, Caroline, you're probably the only one that would change for, because you'd probably be entering requisitions for workforce and UI.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think that she's really the only one.
The only time it's going to come in, Carolina, is when you're using a certain type of state funds.
Okay.
And really, well, come to think of it, you're probably not going to run into that anyway, because you're going to use cost center overhead for most of your NPS stuff. So take that back. It wouldn't affect you.
Okay. Fine.
Okay. So if you're in a program, that's going to 99.9% of the time that number's going to stay the same for whatever program area you're assigned to. Okay. All right. The class can be used with multiple account codes. True or false? Did we all get that? Ooh, half and half. Okay. This is very important. This is the source of a lot of the errors that get pushed back. The class can only the class is only associated with oh, maybe it's tricky the way it's worded. Okay. So the class is unique to a particular account code. So if you the class is unique to a particular account code. So if you use travel will always have, is it 301? Okay. So you can never use another class with account code 301. That's the point of that one. So maybe, you know, it may not be wordy for this, but that's the point we're trying to get to. Class will always be associated with, travel will always be associated with account code 301. But that is a lot of the errors that get pushed back. And I think that sheet that Paul, you just had, like that serves as a guide. It shows like how the accounts line up with each class. So it's never gonna, that will never change. So whatever account code is associated with that particular class, that always stays the same. And, you know, unfortunately, TeamWorks doesn't have them linked, so you have to put in the class, and that, you know, like you mentioned, if you're used to using a certain class all the time, it's gonna, you know, you might.
So I think maybe the account code can never be used for another class.
Yeah, that's what I said. Yes, that's what I said. I probably didn't word that for this, but yeah, that's where a lot of the errors come from. People using the wrong class associated with the account code. Okay, so we won't count that one. Okay, the account code describes the item being purchased, true or false. Okay, true. Yep, we all got that right. Okay, Earl. Okay, how are the distributions of fund source project codes determined? Is it based on the codes you normally use? Is it based on proportional benefit of those codes? Or is it based on guidance from purchasing? So do you base it on codes you normally use? Is it based on proportional benefit? Okay, we got it. Proportional benefit. Everybody get that right? Okay. Okay, this one is very important for those of you entering requisition. So if you are, if you're in a program and you all use multiple fund sources or multiple project codes, and a lot of times we get a lot of questions on how do we know which project codes to use. So you want to, if you're working on something that is for UI, and you have a UI project code, and you might have other project codes available to you that you use. Based on the item or the function or the activity that you're purchasing the item for, that code should be related to the functional activity that you're using. If you're purchasing something for UI, then it should be a UI project code that's being used. If you're, in other words, if you're doing something, you know, if you're working on something for ES, you shouldn't be using a UI project code for it. You can't charge 100% to one code for something that other codes are going to get the benefit of. That's the most important thing to remember.
You can use, I choose a good example of that because we purchase certain programs that just UI uses, but then we purchase programs that the whole agency uses.
Right. So if it's something, she's in the administration program, a lot of what they do is administrative overhead type things, but they also do a lot of things that are unique for the UI program. So if IT is working on something just related to UI, and it only benefits UI, then that item can be purchased 100% with UI funds. If it's something that benefits the entire agency, then she's going to use our administrative overhead, which is AS&T. Some of you very important to keep in mind. You can't charge something to one code that other codes get the benefit of, and vice versa. You know, that could cause audit issues. And also, a lot of times, if you're in a career center, a lot of times if you use 499999, that will cover you in terms of purchasing things that benefit multiple programs. So if you're buying supplies, or if it's related to the copier machine, or something that all program areas share within your cost center, then you can charge it to cost center overhead, which is 9999. And that's getting, everyone will have that same proportional benefit. Do we have any questions about that one? And we just have one more, I think, or a couple more. Okay, account codes can be entered at the summary level, true or false? That is an error. That is wrong. That is an error. That is a mistake. The answer, yeah. Disregard that. The answer is false. Okay, if you look at the sheet that you have, the list of account codes, all of those are listed at the summary level. This is the way. Okay, so just note you cannot enter account codes at the summary level. That's an error. The answer is false. So just please remember.
Which one is the summary level? Is it this one or this?
Those are listed at the summary level. And usually, like if the account code ends in 0, usually it's that top one. Okay, yeah. Like if it says 612, this is not, I guess this is not a good example, but if it says 620,000, usually that denotes the summary level. The account codes that you normally use, we usually have a 1 or some other digit at the end. I think someone was working on another list, just unique to the one. Okay.
The easiest way of doing that, if you use that document, you're probably going to have, like I said before, let's say you have 10 line items, probably not that many. Let's say you got repair and maintenance and other operating and telephone, which you get charged for, but Caseta handles that. You're going to use that number there to look at your little hourglass that we showed you. So take the first 3 numbers and put in your search engine when you go into the little hourglass and go, whatever, 627 or whatever it is. And then look at your drop down. And the drop down is going to give you a description and the specific code that you can use. And then just click on that. So just use that as a reference tool for the first 3 numbers and also the relationship to your class, because your class is going to be right there with it. It's a one-to-one relationship between account and class.
Okay. The fund code always remains the same, true or false. Fund code, this is one of your chart fields when you're filling out the position. The fund code always remains the same. Okay, almost everybody has that one. And the fund code is 10100. Just so y'all, I'm sure y'all know. All right. Well, that's the end of it. Earl, who's Earl? I'm sorry. Oh.
You never use a real name for this.
Oh.
Who's Earl?
Well, congratulations to Earl. So, okay. Well, does anybody have any questions? That was just a quick review of things that we normally see and just some little helpful tips. Just to keep in mind as you're entering your requisitions. And again, if you have any questions, I just encourage everybody to contact the budget analyst if you're unsure about something. Oh. Okay, well, that's all I have.
I just want to thank you guys for letting me listen in and not make me drive 5 hours.
You can see us. Have see us sometime. Glad you're doing it. Yeah, when she had training up in the building.
Well, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Okay.
Well, very good. Both of you. Do you set that up and, you set that up before you came here?
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Just a few minutes before I
I'm
came.
gonna learn that.
Earl, get out, everybody. Look at that. Look at Earl. Okay.
You gonna be in that? Yeah.